What if I told you that a 15-year-old girl accidentally photographed her own killer and didn't realize it until it was too late? In 2003, Sarah Martinez was documenting her dream vacation when she unknowingly captured images of the man who would murder her and her father just hours later. But here's the chilling part: she kept taking pictures even after she realized what was happening, leaving behind photographic evidence that would solve the case 8 years later. Hit subscribe because what I'm about to show you will change how you think about trusting strangers forever. David Martinez was the kind of man who made you believe in second chances. At 42 years old, he taught environmental science at Jefferson High School in Phoenix, Arizona, where students would literally beg their counselors to get them into his classes. Not because they were easy — David never made anything easy — but because he had this incredible ability to make complex ecological concepts feel like adventure stories. Picture this: a man who spent his own salary buying field trip equipment for students whose families couldn't afford it, who organized weekend camping trips to the Sonoran Desert, teaching kids from the inner city about wildlife they'd never imagined existed. His principal called him irreplaceable, but David would just smile and say he was doing what the planet needed him to do. But here's what made David truly extraordinary, and this detail is going to become absolutely crucial. When we get to the terrifying part of our story, he was completely devoted to his 15-year-old daughter, Sarah. After his wife, Carmen, died in a car accident 2 years earlier, David had transformed his grief into an almost superhuman dedication to being the best single father imaginable. Every moment he wasn't teaching, he was with Sarah. Every decision he made, he filtered through one question: what would Carmen want for our daughter? Now, Sarah Martinez, she was something truly special. At just 15 years old, she was already taking advanced placement courses, passionate about wildlife photography, and she had this incredible talent for capturing moments that professional photographers twice her age couldn't match. Despite growing up in the desert, she dreamed of studying marine biology at UC San Diego, fascinated by ecosystems she'd only read about in books. But here's what's going to matter when we get to the absolutely chilling part of this story. Sarah had developed this obsessive habit of documenting everything with her camera. Everything. She carried that camera everywhere, taking pictures of moments that seemed completely ordinary, but would later prove to be anything but ordinary. Her friends joked that she was creating a visual diary of her entire life, but they had no idea how prophetic those words would become. The summer road trip had been Sarah's idea, born from her fascination with the diverse ecosystems of the American West. She wanted to photograph everything from desert landscapes to alpine meadows, creating what she called her Journey Through America's Wild Heart portfolio. David, seeing an opportunity to combine his expertise in environmental science with Sarah's artistic passion, began planning what he dramatically called the Great Martinez Expedition. For 6 months, David meticulously planned their cross-country journey with the same attention to detail he brought to his lesson plans. He researched every route, every national park, every ecological zone they would encounter. He even bought a 1985 Ford Econoline van, painted forest green with cream trim, and spent his entire spring break converting it into the perfect mobile base camp for their adventure. They christened the van Explorer, and Sarah convinced her father to install a small photo processing station in the back so she could develop her black and white film during the trip. David initially worried about the chemicals and safety, but Sarah's enthusiasm and her promise to follow strict safety protocols won him over. Their planned route would take them through the painted deserts of Utah, through the aspen forests of Colorado, and finally into Wyoming to explore the geothermal wonders of Yellowstone. David had made reservations at specific campgrounds, but deliberately left portions of their itinerary flexible. He wanted to preserve that spirit of discovery that had made him fall in love with the natural world. The night before their departure, Sarah video called her Aunt Maria in Los Angeles and spent 3 hours excitedly describing all the ecosystems they planned to explore. Maria later told investigators that she'd never seen Sarah so animated about anything, and that the girl had specifically mentioned wanting to photograph the scary, beautiful places where civilization ends and wilderness begins. But here's the detail that's going to absolutely haunt you by the end of this story. During that video call, Sarah mentioned she was bringing twice as many rolls of film as she normally would because She wanted to document everything that happens, even the parts that might be too intense for other people to handle. At the time, Maria thought it was typical teenage dramatics. Later, those words would take on a significance that would keep investigators awake at night. On July 8, 2003, David and Sarah Martinez loaded their final supplies into Explorer and departed Phoenix at dawn, beginning what they believed would be a transformative month-long adventure through America's most spectacular wilderness areas. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watched them pull out of the driveway at 5:47 a.m., with Sarah already taking pictures through the passenger window, documenting their departure in the golden morning light. Their first major stop was Arches National Park in Utah, where David had planned to spend 3 days helping Sarah understand the geological forces that had shaped the landscape. They made excellent time, stopping for lunch in Flagstaff, where David photographed Sarah standing next to Explorer, both of them practically glowing with excitement and anticipation. For the next 16 days, everything proceeded exactly according to David's carefully crafted plan. He maintained an active presence on their travel blog, posting detailed scientific observations alongside Sarah's stunning photographs. They explored the slot canyons of Utah, where Sarah captured images that would later be featured in National Geographic's online gallery. They hiked through the aspen forests of Colorado, where David's knowledge of forest ecology helped Sarah understand the intricate relationships between plants, animals, and their environment. But here's what's going to matter when we get to the absolutely terrifying part of this story. In every single photograph from those first 16 days, you can see pure joy and wonder on their faces. Father and daughter living their absolute best life, completely unaware that someone had been carefully tracking their movements and was now positioning himself to intercept them. On July 23rd, they entered Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, where they spent 5 days exploring alpine meadows, documenting wildlife, and collecting samples for Sarah's photography project. Their final blog post, uploaded from their campground near Bear Lake, showed Sarah crouched beside a mountain stream, completely absorbed in photographing a family of elk grazing in a meadow that stretched towards snow-capped peaks. David's caption was simple but revealing. Watching Sarah discover the interconnectedness of all living things never gets old. Tomorrow we head north toward Wyoming and Yellowstone, the part of the trip she's been most excited about since we started planning this adventure. But here's what David had no way of knowing, and this is where our story takes a turn toward absolute horror. Someone had been methodically following their blog posts, cross-referencing their planned route with local knowledge, and was now waiting for them at exactly the right place and time. July 24th, 2003, began like every other day of their adventure. David and Sarah broke camp at Rocky Mountain National Park, said goodbye to fellow campers they'd befriended over the past week, and headed north toward Wyoming. According to their detailed itinerary, they planned to drive through Fort Collins, then north through Cheyenne, and finally northwest toward Yellowstone National Park. The drive should have taken approximately 7 hours, with planned stops for lunch and fuel. Plenty of time to reach their destination, establish camp, and maybe do some evening photography in the famous golden light that Sarah had been dreaming about capturing. Park rangers at Rocky Mountain National Park later confirmed that the green and cream Ford van passed through the north entrance around 8:15 a.m., with both occupants appearing relaxed and excited. A gas station attendant in Fort Collins remembered serving them around 10:30 a.m., noting that Sarah had purchased a detailed topographical map of Yellowstone while David studied their route and made notes in his ever-present planning notebook. But here's the detail that's going to matter more than you can possibly imagine. The attendant later told investigators that David had asked about scenic back roads to Yellowstone, mentioning that his daughter was working on a photography project and they were hoping to find some lesser-known locations away from the typical tourist crowds. Security footage from that gas station showed Explorer pulling away at 10:47 a.m., heading north on Interstate 25. That grainy footage would become the last confirmed sighting of David and Sarah Martinez alive. Somewhere during the afternoon of July 24th, as they traveled those winding roads through the rugged landscape between Colorado and Wyoming, David and Sarah encountered something that would destroy everything they had built together and loved about life. The first indication that something was catastrophically wrong came on July 26, when David failed to post their daily blog update. David was absolutely religious about maintaining their online journal, partly because extended family and friends were following their adventure, but mostly because he wanted to create a permanent record of what he hoped would be the most meaningful experience of Sarah's young life. When there was no update by the evening of July 27th, and David missed a scheduled phone call with Sarah's Aunt Maria, everyone who knew them understood that something terrible had happened. David never missed scheduled calls, never broke promises, and never went more than 24 hours without some form of communication when traveling with Sarah. Maria contacted the Wyoming State Police on July 28th, officially reporting David and Sarah as missing persons 4 days after their last confirmed sighting and exactly 1 week after their last known location. But here's what's going to absolutely chill you to the bone. The initial search and rescue operation found absolutely nothing. No skid marks on mountain roads, no reports of mechanical problems, no abandoned vehicle, no witnesses who remembered seeing them. It was as if David and Sarah had driven into the vast wilderness of the American West and simply evaporated into thin air. The search for David and Sarah Martinez quickly became one of the most extensive missing persons investigations in Wyoming history. Helicopter crews flew methodical grid patterns over thousands of square miles of mountainous terrain while ground teams systematically checked every rest area, scenic overlook, hiking trail, and potential camping location. The FBI joined the investigation within 48 hours, treating it as a potential kidnapping case due to Sarah's age and the complete absence of any logical explanation for their disappearance. Federal agents interviewed everyone the father and daughter had encountered during their trip, analyzed their financial records, examined their social media activity, and even investigated David's professional relationships, looking for any possible motive. But every single piece of evidence painted exactly the same picture: a devoted father on a legitimate educational adventure with his beloved daughter, with no enemies, no financial problems, no relationship issues, and no reason anyone would want to harm them. Maria Martinez became the public face of the search effort, appearing on CNN, Fox News, and every major network, organizing volunteer search parties that attracted hundreds of people from across the region. Her message was always the same: David and Sarah were living their dream. They were documenting the natural world they both loved. Something terrible happened to them out there, and we will never stop looking until we find them. But here's what's going to matter when we get to the shocking discovery that changed everything. The search teams, despite their dedication and expertise, were looking in completely the wrong places. They focused on the direct route to Yellowstone, the logical places a father and daughter might have stopped, never imagining that David and Sarah had ended up somewhere that defied all logical explanation. As months stretched into years, the case gradually faded from national headlines, though it never left the consciousness of the law enforcement officers who had worked it. Maria Martinez organized annual memorial searches, maintaining a website that attracted thousands of visitors who had been touched by the story of the missing father and daughter. David's students at Jefferson High School established a scholarship in environmental science, while Sarah's photography teacher created a permanent exhibition featuring the images she had captured during the first 16 days of their journey. Those photographs, with their perfect composition and obvious joy, became symbols of interrupted dreams and lost potential. In 2006, 3 years after the disappearance, Wyoming authorities officially reclassified the case as a presumed homicide investigation. This change brought additional resources and specialized investigators, but it also represented the crushing acknowledgement that David and Sarah were almost certainly dead. New investigators brought cutting-edge technology and fresh perspectives. Ground-penetrating radar searched areas that had been examined only visually. Advanced satellite imagery was analyzed frame by frame, looking for any trace of explorer or any signs of human activity. Cold case specialists from the FBI reviewed every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every possible connection. But the mystery remained as impenetrable as the day they had vanished. Here's what those dedicated investigators had no way of knowing, and this is where our story becomes truly horrifying. The answers they desperately sought were hidden less than 60 miles from where they had been searching. Hidden in a location so remote, so deliberately chosen, that it would take a combination of pure chance and advancing technology to reveal the truth. That miraculous breakthrough came on August 3rd, 2011, exactly 8 years and 10 days after David and Sarah Martinez had last been seen alive. A team from the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality was conducting a routine survey of abandoned mining sites in the remote Devil's Canyon area when environmental scientist Dr. Jennifer Walsh noticed something unusual, reflecting sunlight through the thick canopy of pine trees. What she initially assumed was an old mining shed turned out to be something that would reopen one of the state's most haunting, unsolved cases. Hidden beneath 8 years of forest growth, almost completely integrated into the natural landscape, sat the corroded remains of a forest green and cream Ford van. The vehicle was so thoroughly camouflaged by vegetation that the survey team almost missed it entirely. Wild roses had grown through shattered windows, saplings had sprouted around the chassis, and moss covered every metal surface. But there was no mistaking the distinctive profile of the Econoline van that had been the subject of one of the most intensive searches in state history. Dr. Walsh immediately contacted authorities, and within 3 hours, investigators from multiple agencies had established a perimeter around the site. As they began their careful documentation of the scene, there was absolutely no doubt they had found Explorer. But here's what made the discovery so deeply disturbing that it would haunt investigators for years to come. The location raised immediate and terrifying questions about how the van had ended up in such an impossibly remote place. Devil's Canyon was not on any conceivable route David and Sarah would have taken to reach Yellowstone National Park. The nearest maintained road was more than 6 miles away, connected to the discovery site only by abandoned mining roads that were barely passable, even with specialized four-wheel drive vehicles. For a 1985 Ford Econoline van, a vehicle designed for highway travel, not off-road exploration to reach this location, would have required navigating extremely challenging terrain that would have been nearly impossible under normal circumstances. This raised the absolutely terrifying question that would drive the investigation. Had David driven there voluntarily under some kind of duress, or had the vehicle been moved to that location by someone else after the fact? As investigators began processing the scene with painstaking care, they made a series of discoveries that were both illuminating and deeply disturbing. The van's doors were not just unlocked, they were standing partially open, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. There was no sign of David or Sarah inside, but their personal belongings were scattered throughout the interior in a way that suggested a violent struggle. Sarah's photography equipment was distributed throughout the van, but her expensive camera, the one she had carried everywhere for 3 years, was missing, along with numerous rolls of undeveloped film that represented the visual record of their entire journey. Most puzzling was David's wallet, containing his driver's license, credit cards, and $127 in cash, sitting on the dashboard as if it had been deliberately placed there for someone to find. His teaching notebook, where he had meticulously documented every aspect of their trip, was open to a page that contained handwriting that was barely legible but clearly written under extreme stress. The van's keys were on the driver's seat, but the normally organized interior that reflected David's methodical personality was in complete chaos, suggesting that whatever had happened occurred suddenly and without warning. Outside the vehicle, investigators discovered the remnants of what appeared to be a hastily abandoned campsite, but not the kind of organized setup that David would have created. A collapsed tent was tangled in the underbrush. Camping supplies were scattered across a wide area. And most disturbing of all, they found the cold remains of a fire pit that showed evidence of having been used to burn materials other than wood. The forensic examination of the site revealed evidence that would fundamentally change how investigators understood the case. Inside the van, they found David's teaching notebook, its pages damaged by years of moisture, but still partially readable in places that would prove crucial to understanding their final hours. The last entry, dated July 24, 2003, described their departure from Rocky Mountain National Park and their excitement about reaching Yellowstone. But the entry also contained increasingly frantic notations about taking a wrong turn, encountering a helpful stranger, and being led somewhere we shouldn't go. The handwriting deteriorated dramatically throughout the entry, with the final readable words being, "Sarah is scared and something is very wrong here." Forensic botanists determined that the vegetation growth patterns indicated the van had been at that location for approximately 8 years. But soil analysis revealed the presence of accelerants near the fire pit, along with microscopic fragments of photographic film and paper, suggesting that someone had systematically destroyed evidence by burning it. Most significantly, cadaver dogs brought to the scene alerted to multiple areas around the campsite, indicating the almost certain presence of human remains at some point in the past. However, the pattern of alerts suggested that any bodies had been subsequently moved to another location, possibly to the numerous abandoned mine shafts that honeycombed the surrounding area. DNA analysis confirmed that both David and Sarah had been at the site, but also revealed the presence of at least 2 unknown individuals whose genetic profiles were not in any law enforcement database. The discovery transformed what had been a missing persons case into a confirmed double homicide investigation with implications that extended far beyond Wyoming's borders. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was brought in to create a psychological profile of the perpetrator, while specialized forensic teams began the painstaking process of analyzing every piece of physical evidence. The remote location of Devil's Canyon provided crucial insights into the killer's psychology and local knowledge. This was not a place someone would stumble upon accidentally reaching it, required specific knowledge of abandoned mining roads, forest access points, and the ability to navigate terrain that would challenge even experienced off-road drivers. This suggested the perpetrator was either a long-term local resident or someone with extensive experience in the area's mining history. Investigators began interviewing retired miners, local hunters, off-road enthusiasts, and anyone with detailed knowledge of the region's network of abandoned roads and trails. The investigation soon revealed a disturbing pattern of incidents in the years surrounding David and Sarah's disappearance. Multiple reports had been filed describing encounters with a man who would approach travelers, offer unsolicited assistance, and then become increasingly aggressive when his help was declined. While none of these incidents had resulted in violence, they created a concerning pattern when considered alongside David's notebook entries about encountering a helpful stranger. After 14 months of intensive investigation, authorities achieved the breakthrough that would finally provide answers to questions that had haunted 2 states for nearly a decade. The unknown DNA profiles recovered from Explorer matched 48-year-old Vernon Vern Kessler, a local resident with an extensive criminal history and intimate knowledge of the area's mining heritage. Kessler had been living in a remote cabin about 15 miles from the discovery site, supporting himself through seasonal work at local ranches, and what investigators would later discover was a sophisticated operation targeting isolated travelers. When federal agents executed a search warrant at his property, they found a disturbing collection of items that had been taken from victims over many years. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. Kessler had kept Sarah's missing camera, along with camping equipment, personal items, and clothing that matched descriptions of gear the Martinez family had packed for their trip. But the most damning discovery was a collection of photographs that Kessler had apparently taken as trophies, images that documented David and Sarah's final hours in excruciating detail. The photographs revealed the terror and confusion in their faces as they realized the true nature of their situation. They showed David desperately trying to protect Sarah, and Sarah courageously attempting to document their ordeal, even as she understood what was happening to them. When confronted with the physical evidence, Vernon Kessler initially attempted to deny any involvement in the disappearance of David and Sarah Martinez. However, faced with DNA evidence, fingerprints, and his own photographs, he eventually provided a confession that revealed the full scope of his crimes. According to Kessler's detailed confession, he had been monitoring online travel blogs and social media accounts for years, identifying families who were traveling alone through remote areas. He had specifically targeted the Martinez family after reading their blog posts and determining their planned route and timeline. On the afternoon of July 24, 2003, Kessler had positioned himself at a strategic location along a back road that David had mentioned in his blog as a potential scenic detour. When David and Sarah approached, Kessler flagged them down, claiming that there had been a rock slide ahead and offering to guide them around it via an alternative route. David, trusting and focused on ensuring Sarah's safety, had followed Kessler's vehicle deeper and deeper into the wilderness until they reached the remote location where Explorer would remain hidden for 8 years. Once there, Kessler had revealed his true intentions, holding the father and daughter at gunpoint while he systematically robbed them of their belongings. The confession revealed that Kessler had kept David and Sarah alive for several days, forcing them to remain at the remote campsite while he decided what to do with them. During this time, he had tormented them psychologically, taking photographs and forcing them to write letters that he claimed he would send to their family. Sarah had managed to hide several rolls of film in her clothing, secretly documenting their captivity in hopes that the evidence would eventually be found. These photographs, when developed, provided a heartbreaking record of their courage and their desperate attempts to survive. Kessler's confession revealed that he had ultimately killed both David and Sarah, disposing of their bodies in one of the many abandoned mine shafts that dotted the Devil's Canyon area. He had then systematically burned most of their belongings, keeping only items that he found useful or that served as trophies of his crimes. The investigation revealed that David and Sarah Martinez were not Kessler's only victims. Over a period of more than 15 years, he had been targeting isolated travelers, though most of his previous crimes had involved robbery rather than murder. The Martinez family had been killed, according to Kessler, because David had recognized him from a wanted poster and had attempted to escape. Despite extensive searches of the area's mine shafts, the bodies of David and Sarah Martinez were never recovered. Kessler claimed to have forgotten the exact location where he had disposed of them, though investigators suspected he was withholding this information as a final act of cruelty toward their family. Vernon Kessler was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, his refusal to reveal the location of David and Sarah's remains meant that their family was denied the closure that comes with being able to lay loved ones to rest. The case had far-reaching implications for traveler safety in remote areas. Maria Martinez established the David and Sarah Martinez Foundation, which focused on improving emergency communication systems in wilderness areas and educating travelers about the risks of accepting help from strangers in isolated locations. The foundation worked with technology companies to develop better GPS tracking systems for travelers and lobbied for increased cell phone coverage in remote areas. They also created educational materials that were distributed at national parks and recreational areas, helping other families avoid the fate that had befallen David and Sarah. David's classroom at Jefferson High School became a permanent memorial, with students maintaining a website that continued his environmental education mission. Sarah's photography teacher established an annual scholarship for students pursuing wildlife photography, ensuring that her artistic vision would continue to inspire future generations. The discovery in Devil's Canyon led to renewed investigations of other unsolved disappearances in the region, with authorities examining whether Kessler might have been responsible for additional crimes. While no definitive connections were established to other cases, the investigation revealed the vulnerability of travelers in remote areas and the sophisticated methods used by predators who specifically target isolated victims. The case became a study in how technology and social media, while providing wonderful opportunities for sharing experiences, can also provide dangerous individuals with detailed information about potential victims. The Martinez family's blog, which had been intended to share their joy and discoveries with friends and family, had ultimately provided their killer with a roadmap to intercept them. Law enforcement agencies across the western United States began sharing information more systematically about crimes targeting travelers, and new protocols were established for monitoring and investigating reports of suspicious individuals approaching tourists in remote areas. Despite Kessler's conviction, many questions about the Martinez case remain unanswered. Investigators believe that Kessler may have had accomplices, given the physical evidence suggesting multiple unknown individuals had been at the Devil's Canyon site. The DNA profiles of these other individuals were never identified, and Kessler maintained his innocence regarding any co-conspirators. The photographs that Sarah had hidden, when finally developed, revealed glimpses of other individuals who may have been involved in their captivity. However, these images were too damaged and unclear to provide definitive identification of additional suspects. Perhaps most tragically, the exact location of David and Sarah's remains continues to be unknown. Despite numerous searches of the area's abandoned mine shafts and the use of advanced ground-penetrating radar, their bodies have never been recovered. This means that Maria Martinez and the extended family have never been able to achieve the closure that comes with a proper burial. The Martinez case highlighted broader issues about safety in America's wilderness areas and the challenges of protecting travelers who venture into remote regions. The case led to discussions about whether popular travel blogs and social media accounts should include less specific information about planned routes and timing. It also raised questions about the adequacy of emergency communication systems in remote areas and whether more needs to be done to ensure that travelers can summon help when they encounter dangerous situations. The psychological impact of the case extended far beyond the immediate family. David's students, Sarah's friends, and the broader community of people who had followed their journey experienced a form of collective trauma that changed how they viewed the natural world and their place in it. Today, if you visit Rocky Mountain National Park, you'll find a small memorial plaque dedicated to David and Sarah Martinez near the Bear Lake Trailhead, where they spent their final peaceful days. The plaque reads, "In memory of David and Sarah Martinez, who found joy in the natural world and shared that joy with others. Their passion for learning and discovery continues to inspire all who venture into the wilderness." The memorial has become a gathering place for travelers who have been touched by their story, and park rangers report that visitors often leave flowers, photographs, and handwritten notes expressing how the Martinez family's experience has influenced their own approach to wilderness travel. Maria Martinez visits the memorial every year on the anniversary of their disappearance, bringing fresh flowers and spending time reflecting on the dreams that were cut short. She has said that while the pain of their loss will never fully heal, she finds comfort in knowing that their story has helped protect other families from experiencing similar tragedies. While Vernon Kessler was convicted and sentenced for the murders of David and Sarah Martinez, the FBI continues to investigate whether he may have been responsible for other unsolved cases throughout the western United States. The sophisticated nature of his operation and the evidence suggesting multiple accomplices has led investigators to believe that there may be additional victims whose cases have never been solved. The Bureau has established a task force specifically focused on crimes targeting travelers in remote areas, and they continue to analyze cold cases that may be connected to Kessler's activities. They have also worked with international law enforcement agencies to determine whether similar patterns of crimes targeting tourists exist in other countries. The technology used to eventually solve the Martinez case has been applied to numerous other cold cases, leading to breakthroughs in investigations that had been stalled for years. The combination of advanced DNA analysis, improved database systems, and sophisticated environmental forensics has opened new possibilities for solving crimes that previously seemed impossible to resolve. 8 years they searched. 8 years of hope, fear, and questions that seemed to have no answers. When the truth finally emerged, it was more horrifying than anyone had dared to imagine, not just a random crime of opportunity, but a calculated predator who had been hunting travelers for more than a decade. David and Sarah Martinez left Phoenix that July morning in 2003 expecting to create memories that would last a lifetime. Instead, they became victims of a monster who saw their trust and enthusiasm as weaknesses to be exploited and their isolation as an opportunity for unspeakable violence. The photographs that Sarah took during those first 16 days of their journey, the ones that survived and are now displayed in the memorial exhibition, show a young woman full of dreams and potential, completely unaware that she was being stalked by someone who saw her and her father not as human beings worthy of respect and protection, but as prey. But perhaps most chilling of all is the realization that if David and Sarah had made slightly different choices, if they had stuck to their original route, if they had been more suspicious of offers of help, if they had shared less detailed information about their travels, they might still be alive today. The randomness of their encounter with evil serves as a stark reminder that tragedy can strike anyone, anywhere, at any time. Today, if you drive through the wilderness areas of Colorado and Wyoming where this tragedy unfolded, you'll notice something has changed. Emergency communication towers now pierce the mountain skyline. Trail markers gleam with reflective paint that catches headlights from miles away. Ranger stations that once sat empty now buzz with activity around the clock. But here's the haunting truth: these improvements came 8 years too late for David and Sarah Martinez. Every upgraded system, every new safety protocol, Every additional patrol route exists because of what happened to them in those remote mountains. Their story didn't just end with their discovery, it sparked a complete transformation of how we protect travelers in America's most isolated regions. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you been lost, maybe on a hiking trail or driving through an unfamiliar area, and someone appeared offering help? That moment of relief when a stranger approaches with a friendly smile and says, "I know exactly where you need to go. Just follow me." It feels like a blessing, doesn't it? Like the universe sent someone to rescue you from your predicament. The Martinez family felt that same relief, that same gratitude, that same trust in human kindness. And that's exactly what their predator was counting on. This case shattered something fundamental about how we view the act of helping strangers. It revealed a terrifying truth that most of us never want to acknowledge. Sometimes the person extending their hand to pull you out of danger is the very person who orchestrated that danger in the first place. Sometimes your rescuer is actually your predator. The Martinez family's legacy isn't just about the tragedy of their deaths, it's about the uncomfortable questions their story forces us to confront. In our connected world, where we share every detail of our lives online, how do we balance openness with safety? When we're exploring remote areas, seeking adventure and natural beauty, how do we distinguish between genuine help and calculated manipulation? These aren't just philosophical questions anymore. They're survival questions. And the answers could determine whether your next adventure becomes a cherished memory or a cautionary tale that investigators study for years to come. The community that rallied around the Martinez family's disappearance refused to let their story end in defeat. Search teams that spent 8 years combing through the wrong mountains didn't just give up when the bodies were found. They demanded answers. They demanded change. They demanded that no other family would have to endure what the Martinez family endured. Every emergency beacon now installed in those mountains carries their names. Every improved cellular tower extends their reach. Every additional ranger patrol walks in their footsteps. David and Sarah Martinez may have lost their lives to a predator's calculated cruelty, but their story became a shield protecting countless others. If you're planning your next outdoor adventure, remember this. The Martinez family did everything right. They researched their route. They stayed together. They even documented their journey. But they encountered something they never could have prepared for. A predator who had spent years perfecting his method of targeting vulnerable travelers. Their story teaches us that vigilance isn't paranoia. Caution isn't cowardice. And sometimes the most dangerous person you'll meet is the one who seems most eager to help you. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because every week we explore cases that change how we understand safety, trust, and the thin line between adventure and tragedy. Every missing person has a story that deserves to be told, and every story contains lessons that might prevent future heartbreak. The Martinez family's journey may have ended in unimaginable tragedy, but their impact continues to ripple through time. Every traveler who reaches their destination safely because of improved emergency systems, every family that stays together because they learned from this case, every person who thinks twice before following a stranger into the wilderness, they're all part of David and Sarah's ongoing legacy. In the end, that's how we honor victims like David and Sarah Martinez, not just by remembering how they died, but by ensuring that their deaths created a safer world for everyone who comes after them. Their story reminds us that even in the face of calculated evil, human courage and determination can still triumph. Because David and Sarah Martinez deserve so much more than the fate that found them in those mountains. But their memory continues to light the way for others, ensuring that their journey, however tragic, will never be forgotten.